Welcome to Jurassic World Rebirth, that starts off 17 years ago on an island called Ile Sainte-Hubert in an Indian lab where they are mutating dinosaurs because people are getting sick of seeing the same things at Jurassic Park. We see these two minions performing this ritual to enter and leave a highly classified area. One of these minions is eating a Snickers bar and drops the packaging on the floor, which gets sucked up into a ventilation vent, causing a containment failure which disables the security. Okay, here's where I get my balls out. How in any manner does a wrapper which goes into a vent cause the security to get disabled? They could have written anything in the script like human error, but they chose a stupid coincidence. What happens is the security gets shut down and all the mutated dinosaurs get released. In particular, this big Megamind looking dinosaur known as D-Rex gets released and eats one of the minions because he didn't make it in when the door shut, all while the other minion is watching. Like, I would be running. Those walls ain't containing that dino. He better get you next. Now cut to present day, 32 years since dinos returned. Dinosaurs are dying because of the modern climate and disease. They can only survive in the tropical band around the equator with human access restricted. Zora, our main character, sneaks into Martin's to ask questions about a job she was offered, where she has to collect samples of dinosaurs around the equator for a large pharmaceutical company known as Parker Genetics, which Martin works for to help heal heart disease. Initially, she is reluctant because she lost her friend on her last mission, but once he talks about money, having in deep buckets, she accepts the offer for $10 million. Let me get this straight. A pharmaceutical company that could potentially profit billions and you only take $10 million. Interesting. They go visit dino doctor known as Henry, who explains that they need to collect samples from their largest dinosaurs because of their larger heart. These dinosaurs being the Mosasaurus, which is that massive dinosaur that ate Indominus Rex in the first movie, avian dino called Quetzalcoatlus, and the giraffe one called the Titanosaurus. He also explains that this drug could be worth trillions, and they need a sample from the dinosaurs alive because they would deoxygenate within seconds, followed by hypoxia and whatnot. Exactly, we are told this drug is worth trillions. Henry thought he was just advising them on the mission, but Martin says that he needs to come due to his knowledge, ultimately using the excuse that he will see dinosaurs in person as a convincing factor. The following day in Paramaribo, Suriname, we meet their transportation guy Duncan. Duncan breaks the news to Martin that he will not do the job because it's too risky for his boat. Zora then says that the only way he would do it is if he would offer more money, which he does, a very sneaky plan they had set up. We are also introduced to this Aussie, Bird Stuff, Nina and Leclerc. The team then starts making their way to the Mosasaurus, who is living near the equator, based off the tracker that was put in it. The way they will collect the sample is through this very special gun, which when shot will attach to the dinosaur and collect the sample, and when at capacity it will eject. Cut to probably the most useless thing in this movie, this random family. Older daughter Teresa, younger daughter Isabella, father Ruben and boyfriend Xavier, who went sailing too close to the equator unknowingly about the dinosaurs and end up getting toppled by a Mosasaurus, causing them to send a distress call which Xavier almost had to die for because he got trapped in the boat when they got flipped. By the way, Xavier is an asshole who doesn't do anything to help them sail. This distress call is picked up by the other team on their boat nearby. However, Australian and Martin don't want to attend because it will be wasting time. Duncan and Zora say otherwise, and since it's Duncan's boat, he makes a call to go save them. When approaching the boat, Father Ruben sends out a flare like they don't already see them. After they are saved, they end up tracking the Mosasaurus down, or should I say the Mosasaurus finds them. Dr. Henry was going to take the shot, but Zora convinced him that he's a pussy and ends up taking the shot instead, and is successful after 5 fucking minutes where she had plenty of opportunity to take the shot. Soon after, they get attacked by a group of Spinosaurus because they usually linger around the Mosasaurus to help them hunt. Australian guy whips out his big dick and starts shooting at them, missing every single shot he takes, and ends up getting gobbled by a Spinosaurus who jumps on the side of his shit. Duncan uses his big brain and decides to speed to the shallow water near the island where the dinosaurs can't swim. While this is happening, Teresa calls out for help on the radio, but Martin tries to stop her because their mission is illegal and is supposed to be a secret. She ends up pushing him, but because of physics and weight distribution, she ends up falling backwards almost off the side of the boat, but hangs on while Martin watches. She eventually falls into the water. Xavier sees this and ends up jumping in after her, followed by their father and daughter. You know what they say about family. The boat eventually reaches shallow water, so Zora, Henry and Nina jump off the boat with their gear, whilst Duncan and Leclerc stay in the boat. The boat crashes into the land but is barely damaged. They could literally have stayed on the boat, or at least jump more closer to the land so they don't have to swim as far. Nina, Henry and Zora reach shore, but Nina doesn't realize that there's a little Spinosaurus right next to her. Like, how can you not see or at least hear that beast? She ends up getting gobbled and the rest of the team mourn because she died. They carry on to the island, which is the same island we saw at the start of the movie, Ile Sainte-Hubert. The family reunites and ends up swimming to a different part of the island that was closer to them. Back to Martin, he says that can't predict what is on the island because it's full of mutated dinosaurs from the InGen lab. As they move, Zora says that she hired a backup team to come look for them if they don't respond to their message on the radio, leaving them 24 hours to stay alive. The family decide to follow the InGen lab pipes because they think it will lead them to the town. Little do they know that there's no town on this island and it's deserted. The team starts making their way through the forest and are forced into a small pool of water. As this happens, Zora questions Martin on how Teresa fell into the water, but he brushes it off saying, "Bitch, what are you applying?" They soon end up getting out of the water, but Dick fuck Martin ends up staying in because he's too engaged in Henry's conversation about how humans won't last longer than dinosaurs did. Like, bro, you can still move and listen. And you'll see why next, because this slimy eel thing comes close to him, but he manages to get out of the water in time. The family starts making their way through the jungle and Bella stumbles across a baby dinosaur which Teresa shoos away. Ruben then thanks Xavier for jumping in the water for Teresa but doesn't give a shit. They end up finding a place to rest, but Ruben, the dad, stays awake cause he's watching out for dinosaurs. But Xavier assures Ruben that it's his watch and that he can fall asleep. Honestly, I will never ever fall asleep in a jungle full of dinosaurs. Ruben then continues to glaze Xavier, who doesn't even know why Teresa wants to be with him. Then he gives some inspirational talk, but Xavier needs to take a piss. Literally 5 seconds later, that little dinosaur comes back and Bella decides to keep it without Ruben noticing. There's no way he fell asleep in 5 seconds. Xavier is taking a piss, but these raptors start to sneak up on him, but he doesn't do a single fuck about it and decides to stay still. But lucky for him, a flying dinosaur sweeps in and takes the raptor for food. Not seeing Xavier at all, this guy must be invisible. Meanwhile, the team ends up making it to this large flat valley with this very tall lemongrass. It's probably about like 1.5 meters tall. Lucky for them, it turns out that a pack of Titanosauruses were laying in this field. How does a 50-meter dinosaur go invisible in a grass that's only 1 meter high? Like, their body is more thicker than the height of the grass. These two dinosaurs start making love and Zora ends up getting the sample whilst Henry goes and touches, having an instantaneous orgasm. They start making their way to the flying dinosaur, which is conveniently right next to the valley they are in. While this is happening, the family continues to make their way and the little girl Bella decides to name her dinosaur Dolores. The to Xavier ends up falling through this hole which leads down a hill, and the stupid family decides to follow his steps instead of assessing how dangerous the situation could be. Dolores decides to run away because of a obviously imminent larger threat that is nearby, but the family goes, "Oh, what is she scared of?" They end up finding a boat across the river which Teresa goes to collect because her father cannot walk. As this happens, she sees the dead corpse of a dino being eaten by a frillneck raptor, but this raptor gets scared away because there's a T-Rex sleeping in the fields right next to her. She then collects the boat and pulls it into the water without the T-Rex noticing. She then inflates the boat, which the T-Rex still doesn't notice, and the boat conveniently makes its way to the end of the dock. See that shit? How does that happen? The family then joins her on the boat, which finally alarms the T-Rex, prompting it to chase them down the river. Lucky for them, the T-Rex can't swim. This turns out to be a mutant, being a T-Rex cross Spinosaur, so it ends up swimming after them. The T-Rex then flips the boat and tries to bite Ruben out of the water. However, Bella is still stuck under the boat. The T-Rex notices this and decides to bite the boat, but instead he ends up chewing it like a soft toy. And the family thinks that Bella had died, but she didn't. She just floats right to them and makes it just in time before the dinosaur bites. The team makes it to the top of the flying dinosaur nest and have to use a wire to leverage their way down. And instead of getting it from the actual dinosaur, they have to get it from the egg, because the dinosaur will most likely kill them in person. The clerk, Zora, and Henry start making their way down the mountain to the nest, but Henry is a pussy and he's scared of heights. Once they make it to the nest, Henry takes a sample from the egg. Zora then questions at a very convenient time what they could do if they didn't give the samples to the pharmaceutical company. Henry responds saying they could open source it and millions more lives could be saved, but they make no money. The big flying dinosaur shows up and starts to attack them, but Henry left the sample in the middle of the floor. Leclerc decides to make the ultimate sacrificial move by throwing his tool at the dinosaur, distracting it, whilst Henry's cable gets pulled, throwing him off the side of the cliff. Leclerc ends up dying. Duncan and Martin follow down this random staircase they found at the top to avoid the flying dino. Meanwhile, Henry manages to collect a sample off the side of the cliff but falls and is saved because he coincidentally fell into a bunch of leaves and into a shallow lake. Speaking physics, there's no way those leaves were strong enough to sustain his weight. He should have fell straight through them and plummeted to his death. But movie science is quite peculiar. Not to mention he makes it out of the water uninjured. The rest of the crew make it to him and they collect the final sample, which floats its way down. The family reach the end of the pipes, which is unspecified, but I did some research and it's called Site B, the place where they fabricated dinosaurs. Conveniently, the other group also made it to Site B. Like, was it a f***ing map that told them to go to this specific part on the island? Did they know what part of the island they had to go to? Zora notices Nike footprints hinting that the other family is nearby and starts calling out for the family. The family hears the call and they end up reuniting. Teresa ends up confronting Martin, but he turns evil and whips out his gun. Martin uses this leverage and decides to handcuff the samples to himself. As this happens, Bella hears some weird sounds. Backup generators turn on and the whole place lights up, inviting dinosaurs to their location. 2 flying dinosaurs appear out of nowhere and start chasing the group. The family makes it to the store whilst Duncan and Henry make it to this lab area, indicating that this is the same place we saw from the start of the movie. Zora decides to distract the dinosaur and hide under the truck with Martin. Martin then gets picked up by the dino who uncouples the handcuffs. The other dinosaur penetrates the store through the ceiling and finds Bella hiding in the fridge. Ruben distracts the dinosaur by throwing a random item to another part in the store. They then hide from the dino by entering a sewage system under the store. Duncan finds out that there is a boat on the island that will lead them to the ocean. At the same time, the helicopter shows up, so Henry uses a flare to get its attention. Martin decides to take off by driving the vehicle after finding the key, leaving Zora in the bushes. However, the dinosaur gets distracted after hearing the family talk in the drains and manages to slither its way into the sewer. Zora decides to follow in order to warn the family. The helicopter starts making its way to the island. However, the D-Rex appears in the smoke which came out of nowhere and destroys the helicopter. Duncan and Henry reunite with the family in the tunnel to inform them about the boat. They start making their way to the boat whilst Martin is chucking donuts around the island. The group eventually makes it to the dock, but they must open the gate from the outside. Bella is the only one that can fit, so she goes to open the gate, but as doing so, the T-Rex shows up. It gets distracted by Martin's car, which it stops eating Martin right after. Duncan then waits for the other dinosaur to come down before shutting the gate to trap it, which does nothing. He could have just went out and shut the gate earlier. The dino was gonna come down no matter what. Risked his life for no reason. Zora collects a sample from Martin's ripped hand and everyone makes their way to the docks. However, the boat decoupler is jammed. The D-Rex follows them and is about to eat Bella. However, Duncan makes the ultimate sacrifice by lighting a flare which attracts the dinosaur to follow him into the jungle, doing an emotional speech before doing so. Zora smashes the chain to decouple the boat. Everyone else is then able to get on the boat to start leaving the island, presuming that Duncan is dead. The D-Rex comes back but gives up chasing them because he can't be bothered. Whilst doing so, they end up seeing another flare getting lit. They approach his flare and it turns out to be Duncan. He managed to survive. How? I don't know, but I like Duncan. They decide to open source the samples and that's it. The end.